In the heart of a small village nestled in the rolling hills of South Africa, there lived an old man named Thabo. He wasn't just any villager, he was known far and wide as the magician, the man who could conjure wonders from thin air, transform objects with a flick of his hand, and even bend the laws of nature itself. But to the people who knew him best, Thabo wasn't just a magician, he was a keeper of ancient secrets, a protector of the land's soul, and a man who carried the weight of generations on his shoulders. Thabo's powers weren't the result of simple tricks or illusions, as some outsiders assumed. They were the product of years of training, meditation, and communion with the spirits of the earth, the wind, and the fire that surrounded his village. The old man had been chosen by the elders long ago, not because of any special talent, but because he had the patience to listen, the wisdom to understand, and the humility to seek knowledge from sources beyond human comprehension. His apprenticeship had been long and arduous. As a young boy, Thabo had watched in awe as the elders performed rituals to summon the rains that nourished the land during the dry seasons. He had seen them call forth the wind to clear the skies of smoke during fires, and he had witnessed them speak to the animals, convincing them to move when a flood threatened. These were the true magicians, the ones who carried the stories of their ancestors in their hearts and minds. When the time came, Thabo was chosen by the spirits. He learned the ancient art of harnessing the elements, using nothing more than his connection to the world around him. His first task had been simple: to heal a sick child whose life hung in the balance. The child's parents had been desperate, having tried everything the doctors could offer, but their child had only grown weaker. Thabo had stepped forward, and using a combination of herbal remedies and a sacred chant, had restored the child to health in a matter of hours. Word of his power spread quickly throughout the village, and soon people from all corners of the region came seeking his help. Though Thabo's gifts were extraordinary, he never sought fame or glory. He lived humbly, growing his own food and tending to his animals. He often wandered the fields and forests, meditating and communing with the natural world, seeking the wisdom of the earth. But as time passed, the villagers began to rely on him more and more. They would come to him not only with their ailments, but with their questions about life, love, and the future. And Thabo, with his deep understanding of the universe, would always have an answer. One day, a traveler arrived in the village, a man from the bustling city who had heard of Thabo's magical abilities. This man, named Jabulani, was a journalist eager to expose the truth behind the so-called magician. He had seen enough fake spiritualists and charlatans in his life to know that there was usually more to these stories than met the eye. He was determined to uncover the secret behind Thabo's powers, convinced that it was nothing more than clever trickery. Jabulani approached Thabo cautiously, skeptical of the old man's abilities. "I've heard many stories about you," Jabulani said, "and I'd like to see it for myself. Show me something, anything, that proves your power." Thabo looked at him with calm eyes, his face a reflection of the wisdom he had gained over the years. He didn't speak for a moment, but instead reached down and picked up a stone from the ground. He held it in his palm for a moment, closed his eyes, and whispered something under his breath. Then, to Jabulani's astonishment, the stone began to glow, its surface shifting and changing colors like a living thing. The journalist gasped in surprise. What is this?" Thabo smiled gently. "The earth holds many secrets, my friend, but to truly understand them, you must be willing to listen." Jabulani, still in shock, took a step back. He had expected a trick, a sleight of hand, but what he had witnessed was beyond anything he could explain. But how? Why? What is it that you seek with these powers? Thabo's expression grew serious. "I don't seek anything for myself, Jabulani. I have learned that the magic I wield is not mine to control. It belongs to the earth, to the ancestors, and to the spirits that guide us. My role is simply to serve as a bridge between the world of the living and the world of the unseen." Jabulani sat down beside him, his skepticism replaced by curiosity. "But why do the villagers come to you? What do they expect from you?" Thabo's eyes grew distant as he spoke. "The people come to me because they seek guidance. Some seek healing, others seek answers to questions about life, but more than anything, they seek balance. The world is full of chaos, Jabulani. People are lost, and they are searching for something to anchor them. The magic I perform is not a trick. It is a reminder that the world is alive, that everything is interconnected. By tapping into the Earth's energy, I am able to restore that balance, even if just for a moment." Jabulani, for the first time in his life, felt a deep sense of awe. He had come to the village expecting to uncover a fraud, but instead had been born into a family that had long served as guardians of the village's most sacred traditions. His grandfather had been a healer, his father a storyteller, and now Thabo was the magician, a title passed down through the ages, each new bearer chosen by the forces of nature themselves. Thabo's powers were not taught in schools or passed through written texts. Instead, they were gifts bestowed upon him after a long, silent apprenticeship with the natural world. As a young boy, Thabo had often wandered the forests surrounding his village, listening to the rustling leaves, the whispering winds, and the songs of the animals. His grandmother, who was the village's elder, would tell him stories of the spirits that lived in the world around them. She spoke of the river spirits that controlled the flow of water, of the mountain spirits who brought forth rain, and of the fire spirits that danced in the flames of their cooking hearths. Thabo learned to respect these spirits, knowing that they were not to be taken lightly. They were the key to his powers, the source of his magic. As Thabo grew older, his connection to the natural world deepened. He learned to read the sky, to understand the patterns of the stars, and to listen to the quiet murmurs of the earth beneath his feet. He discovered that magic wasn't just about waving a wand or saying incantations. It was about balance. Balance between the elements, balance between man and nature, and balance within oneself. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the village, Thabo sat on a large rock by the edge of the river. His weathered hands rested on his knees, his eyes closed in concentration. He was deep in meditation, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath him. The river was unusually still that day, its water smooth as glass, and Thabo knew something was wrong. Suddenly, a voice whispered through the trees, a voice so faint that it could have been the wind itself. "Thabo," it said, "the balance is shifting. The spirits are restless." Thabo's eyes snapped open. He could feel the weight of the voice in his bones, and his heart quickened. The river had always been a source of life for the village, and it was no small matter for the spirits to send a message through it. He stood slowly, his senses heightened as the world around him seemed to shift and tremble. He made his way to the village center where the elders had gathered. They were all there, seated in a circle, their faces grave and their hands clasped together in quiet prayer. Thabo approached them, his face calm but his mind racing. "What has happened?" he asked, his voice steady. One of the elders, an old woman named Zanele, looked up at him with worry in her eyes. "The river, it is drying up. The spirits are angry, and the flow of water has been stopped. Without the river, our crops will wither, and our people will suffer." Thabo frowned. The river was the lifeblood of the village. Without it, nothing would survive. He had never known the spirits to act out of anger before. There was always a reason, something that had disturbed the natural balance. "I must speak with the river spirits," Thabo said. "They have sent their message, but I must understand it fully." The elders nodded, and Thabo set off toward the river once more, this time accompanied by a small group of villagers who followed him with a sense of quiet reverence. As they reached the riverbank, Thabo knelt and placed his hands gently on the ground, feeling the vibrations of the earth beneath him. He closed his eyes once again, reaching out with his senses to the spirit of the river. "Great spirit of the river," Thabo spoke aloud, his voice a soft murmur. "Why have you ceased to flow? What have we done to disturb your peace?" For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, as if the very earth itself were speaking, a voice echoed in Thabo's mind. "The balance has been disturbed," the voice said. "A foreign force seeks to take what does not belong to them. A man who has forgotten the old ways seeks to harness the river's power for his own gain." Thabo's heart sank. The village had always been isolated, protected by the spirits and the natural world, but it was clear now that something or someone had come to disrupt that harmony. He rose to his feet, his eyes burning with determination. "Who is this man?" he asked. "He is one who has forgotten the teachings of his ancestors," the spirit replied. "He seeks to control nature, to bend the elements to his will. He is the one who has blocked the river's flow, and now he will pay the price for his arrogance." Thabo knew that time was running out. The river's flow was vital, not just for the crops, but for the entire ecosystem of the land. If the balance wasn't restored soon, everything the villagers depended on would wither and die. He turned to the villagers who had gathered around him. "We must find this man. We must stop him before it's too late." And so, with the blessing of the spirits, Thabo and a small group of villagers set out to find the one who had disturbed the balance. They traveled far beyond the familiar hills and forests, into unknown lands where the air grew thick with the scent of unfamiliar plants. Along the way, Thabo felt the weight of the journey pressing upon him, but he knew that there was no turning back. The man they sought was a wealthy landowner, a man named Jacobus, who had come to the region with his ambitions to build a great dam, to control the river's flow, and to use its power for his own purposes. Jacobus believed he could harness the energy of the river to power machines and industries that would bring him untold wealth, but he didn't understand the cost of such hubris. When Thabo and his companions reached Jacobus's estate, they found a large construction site where workers were already building the dam. The air was heavy with the sound of machinery, and the land was scarred by the excavation. Thabo's heart sank. This was the work of someone who had no respect for the ancient ways, someone who had forgotten the old teachings. Thabo stepped forward, his voice loud and commanding. "Jacobus," he called out. Jacobus, a tall man with sharp features and a look of arrogance in his eyes, turned to face them. "What do you want, old man?" he sneered. "This is my land now, and I will do as I please with it." Thabo's eyes narrowed. "You have disturbed the river spirit, and for that you will pay a great price." Jacobus laughed. "The river spirit? Don't be foolish. There's no such thing. I control the river now. I control everything." Thabo's expression hardened. "You may control the flow of water, but you cannot control the spirit of the land. Nature has its own way of balancing things, and your greed will not go unpunished." With that, Thabo raised his hands to the sky. The winds began to stir, the earth trembled beneath their feet, and the very air seemed to hum with the power of the spirits. Thabo's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as he called upon the ancient forces to restore the balance. Suddenly, the ground cracked open, and a great surge of water erupted from the earth, flooding the construction site. Jacobus stumbled back in shock, his face turning pale. The workers scattered in all directions, and the dam they had been building was swept away by the force of the river's wrath. "Do not disturb the balance again," Thabo said, his voice like thunder. "The river belongs to no one. It is a gift from the spirits, and it must be respected." Jacobus, now drenched and defeated, could only watch as the waters receded, leaving nothing but the wreckage of his ambition behind. Thabo turned away, leading his people back to their village, knowing that the balance had been restored. But Thabo also knew that the world was changing. There would always be those who sought to control nature, to bend it to their will. It was up to the guardians of the old ways to ensure that the balance was maintained. For as long as the river flowed, there would always be those who would seek to block it. And Thabo, the magician, would be there to stop them. As Thabo and the villagers made their way back to their home, a sense of peace settled over him. The waters had returned to their rightful course, and the spirits had spoken. But even as they walked through the lush greenery that surrounded their village, Thabo couldn't shake the feeling that the journey was far from over. He had confronted one man, but there were many others like him, people driven by greed, ambition, and a desire to control the very forces that made life possible. When they reached the village, the people celebrated. The river had returned, and with it, hope. Crops could be harvested, animals could drink from its waters, and the land would once again thrive. The villagers gathered around the fire that evening, singing songs of gratitude to the river spirits, thanking them for their mercy and protection. Thabo sat among them, his heart still heavy with the weight of the task that lay ahead. The next day, Thabo went to the edge of the village and climbed to the highest hill. From there, he could see the river winding through the valley below, its waters now shimmering under the bright African sun. The river was more than just a source of life for the people. It was a living entity, a spirit that must be respected and nurtured. Thabo understood that the balance they had fought for was fragile, and that there would always be those who would seek to upset it. As he gazed down at the river, Thabo felt a stirring in his soul. It was a deep, unspoken call from the spirit world, a warning, perhaps, or a reminder of the sacred duty he had taken upon himself. The ancient forces were shifting, and though the immediate danger had passed, Thabo knew that the true test of his abilities was yet to come. He turned and walked back to the village, where he found Zanelle waiting for him by the fire. Her eyes were filled with concern, and her voice was low when she spoke. "Thabo, the spirits are restless. The balance has been restored, but I sense a new threat, one that is far greater than the man you faced." Thabo nodded, his mind already racing. He had felt it too, the stirring of something dark, something that threatened not just his village, but the entire land. The world was changing, and with it, the forces of nature were growing uneasy. But what was this new force, and how could he stop it before it consumed everything? That night, Thabo stayed awake, meditating under the stars. He called upon the spirits of the earth, the wind, and the fire to speak with him, to guide him on his path. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the land, and Thabo could feel the pulse of the earth beneath him. The spirits were quiet, but he knew they were listening. As the night wore on, Thabo felt a sudden surge of energy. It was as though the very earth beneath him had shifted, like a crack in the foundation of the world itself. And then he heard it, the faintest whisper, like a breath on the wind. The balance is shifting beyond your reach, Thabo. There is a darkness that grows in the land, and it will take more than your magic to stop it. The voice was not the river spirit, nor the earth spirit, but something older, something more ancient. Thabo's heart raced as he stood, his senses heightened. This was no ordinary threat. It was a force that had lain dormant for centuries, waiting for the right moment to rise. He returned to the village at dawn, his mind clouded with uncertainty. He knew that his magic alone wouldn't be enough. He would need more than just his connection to the earth and the spirits. He would need the strength of the village, the wisdom of the elders, and the unity of his people. Over the next few days, Thabo gathered the elders, the healers, and the wise women of the village. Together they sat in council, discussing the warning he had received and the strange darkness that seemed to be rising. Zanelle, the elder who had spoken to him before, stood before them, her face etched with worry. "There is an old prophecy," Zanelle said softly, her voice carrying the weight of years of knowledge. "It speaks of a time when the land will be consumed by a shadow, a darkness that feeds on the balance of nature. The spirits have always warned us of this moment, but they have not told us how to stop it." Thabo's brow furrowed as he listened intently. "What does the prophecy say?" Zanelle's eyes were distant as she recalled the ancient words. "It says that the darkness will rise from the cracks in the earth, from the places where the spirits of the land have been disturbed. It will feed on the greed and ambition of men who have forgotten the old ways. Only when the elements are united, when the earth, the fire, the water, and the wind come together, can the darkness be driven back." Thabo felt a shiver run down his spine. The prophecy spoke of an ancient evil, an entity that fed on imbalance and corruption. And now, as the forces of nature grew restless, Thabo realized that this darkness was no longer a distant legend. It was real. "We must prepare," Thabo said, his voice firm with resolve. "We must unite the elements, and we must do so quickly. This darkness will not wait for us to be ready." The elders nodded in agreement, and the village began to prepare for what lay ahead. Thabo knew that he could not face this threat alone. He would need to harness all the magic of the land, drawing upon the river's power, the earth's strength, the fire's warmth, and the wind's speed. He would need to find a way to bind them all together and use their combined power to drive the darkness away. Days turned into weeks as the villagers worked together, preparing sacred rituals, gathering the necessary materials, and training for the battle that was to come. Thabo traveled deep into the forests to commune with the spirits of the wind and the fire. He journeyed to the mountains to seek the wisdom of the earth spirits, and he spent long hours by the river, listening to its murmurings, seeking the guidance of the water spirits. Finally, the day came. The air was thick with anticipation, and the villagers stood ready, their hearts beating in unison. Thabo stood at the center of the village, his arms raised to the sky. Around him, the elements stirred. Flames flickered in the hearths, winds howled through the trees, and the earth trembled beneath their feet. With a deep breath, Thabo closed his eyes and began to chant the ancient words that had been passed down through generations. The magic surged through him, and as he spoke, the elements responded, each one coming to life in their own way. The wind swirled around him, the fire danced with fierce intensity, the earth rumbled beneath him, and the river roared with power. Thabo could feel the darkness approaching, creeping toward them from the shadows of the world, but he would not let it win. The balance had been disturbed once before, and now, with the power of the elements united, Thabo would restore it. With a final, powerful cry, Thabo released the magic, sending a wave of energy that echoed through the land. The darkness recoiled, shrieking as it was pushed back into the depths of the earth. The land shook with the force of the magic, but slowly the storm began to settle, and the air grew still once more. Thabo collapsed to his knees, exhausted but triumphant. The balance had been restored, at least for now, but Thabo knew that the darkness would return one day. The forces of nature were ever changing, and it was his duty, as the magician of the land, to protect them. And so, as the village celebrated, Thabo stood watch over the land, knowing that he would always be ready to defend the balance, no matter what challenges lay ahead.